A low mist clung to the grounds of the abandoned estate when the discovery was made, thin as breath but cold enough to sting the lungs. The men who approached the old cellar door said the hinges screamed like something alive when they forced it open. Their lanterns swung in trembling arcs, scattering light across the dirt steps leading down, steps that hadn't been touched in almost a century. At the bottom, they found it. A wooden coffer no larger than a cradle, bound in rusted iron straps, sealed with a lock so decayed it fell apart under the slightest tap. Inside lay a jumble of objects that shouldn't have survived the decades. Scraps of silk ribbon, small iron tokens shaped like hands, a ledger filled with names written in a trembling female hand. The final page bore a line written darker and more frantic than the rest. The Baron says the game must continue, even if we cannot. There was no dust inside the coffer, no mold on the silk. The air around it felt strangely still, as though whatever had been trapped inside had been waiting. The men later told reporters that a strange odor drifted from the box as they lifted the ledger, a scent like burnt lavender mixed with old sweat. They didn't know then that the ledger's names matched missing women from the early 1800s, women officially recorded as runaways, though none had ever gone farther than the river's edge. They didn't know the iron tokens were once hung around the necks of those same women, or that each token was the mark of a forfeited round in a weekly game their master forced them to play. But they would learn. And in learning, they would uncover the shadow of a man known in whispers as the Baron, an aristocrat by reputation, a tormentor by truth, whose charming correspondence and generous public donations had masked a private world that could rival the darkest Gothic fiction. What lay beneath his estate would expose a buried scandal involving prominent families, falsified ledgers, and a body count no court had dared to acknowledge. Before we continue with the story of the Baron and his strange weekly game, join our community of mystery lovers. Hit subscribe and tell us in the comments which state you're listening from. Your support helps us uncover more forgotten stories like this one. The land that would one day cradle the Baron's estate did not begin in silence. In the early 19th century, the banks of the Redwater River in rural Georgia were alive with clatter and labor, the sort found in a young country convinced of its own invincibility. America was expanding with the urgency of a fever, and the South, with its vast plantations, tobacco plots, and wide cotton fields, imagined itself the beating heart of that new world. Every dawn brought the cries of roosters and the rumble of wagons. Every twilight soaked the horizon in a deep, warm red that made the river seem like a vein bleeding across the land. Small towns dotted the region in loose intervals, each with its wooden chapel, its general store with a squeaking signboard, and its courthouse where dust settled on the boots of jurymen. The air smelled of tilled earth, river mud, and animal musk. Church bells tolled with such regularity that they became part of the rhythm of living, a constant reminder of sin, labor, and fragile redemption. In those days, a man's respectability mattered more than his honesty, and a woman's silence mattered more than her suffering. The world was rigid, ordered, and cruel beneath its veneer of Christian duty. On the plantations, the enslaved labored under a sun that seemed vengeful in its heat. Fields stretched so far that an overseer standing at one end appeared smaller than a child's toy. Days were long, whispers passed quietly, and songs carried across the fields like the hum of something ancient. Part prayer, part protest, part memory of a homeland none had seen but all felt in their bones. Nights came with their own sounds, cicadas buzzing like restless spirits, the slow creak of weathered barns, and, from certain houses, the muffled cries everyone pretended not to hear. It was in this environment that the Baron arrived, a man whose real name almost no one now remembers. He came from European aristocracy, or so he claimed, though no ship manifest ever firmly linked him to the lineage he boasted. He purchased the vast tract of Redwater land from an ailing widow whose sons had died in a distant war. He renovated the crumbling manor with imported wood and chandeliers he insisted came from Vienna, and he surrounded himself with rituals that seemed theatrical to the locals but charming enough to earn him their deference. He was tall, pale, and impeccably dressed, always wearing gloves even in the relentless southern heat. He carried a silver-topped cane, though he never once leaned on it, and he spoke with an accent no one could quite place, something vaguely continental, the sort that made simple statements feel like decrees. In town meetings, men laughed too eagerly at his mild jokes, eager to win his favor. Women praised his courteous presence, though some confessed privately that his gaze lingered a little too long, studying rather than admiring. The Baron's estate became the pride of the county, a symbol of wealth and sophistication. Behind its tall iron gates, the grounds were manicured with almost obsessive precision. Rows of magnolia trees lined the main road, their blossoms heavy and sweet. The servants moved silently, quickly, as though fearful of drawing attention. At night, lanterns glowed on the veranda, casting long shadows across the columns, and passers-by often remarked that the manor resembled a great open mouth, its pillars like teeth, its darkened windows like eyes that watched even when empty. Most plantations operated with a cold efficiency that masked their brutality. The Baron's, however, possessed an air of ritual, a sense that the suffering within its walls was not merely the standard cruelty of the era, but something crafted, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Stories began drifting into town about the strange routines imposed on the women held there. The men spoke little about them, perhaps because the Baron kept most of his female slaves in a separate wing, segregated not only by race and gender, but by a peculiar set of rules he alone enforced. Travelers passing through sometimes claimed to hear singing late at night, but not the spirituals or laments common on other plantations. This singing was rhythmic, repetitive, almost chant-like. Others said they saw lantern light moving in odd patterns behind the upper windows, forming shapes that did not look like people walking but like something rehearsed, precise, and unnervingly slow. The local physician once commented at a dinner gathering that the Baron's women appeared pale and withdrawn, like shadows attempting to inhabit flesh. But his remark was dismissed with polite laughter, and no further questions were asked. The town itself was a tapestry of contradictions. Edwin's Bluff, as it was called, prided itself on its church attendance and community charity, yet everyone turned a blind eye to the suffering that underpinned their prosperity. The sermons preached every Sunday warned of eternal damnation for greed and cruelty, and yet these very sins were etched into the daily labor that built their wealth. Women sewed quilts on their porches while whispering about neighbors' scandals. Children fetched water from the pump, their bare feet kicking up dust, while their fathers gathered to discuss cotton yields and rumors of uprisings. Into this mix of piety and hypocrisy, the Baron fit seamlessly. His wealth, charm, and mysterious foreign allure granted him immunity from suspicion, and in those rare moments when a murmur of concern surfaced, when someone mentioned the odd number of women he purchased, or how rarely they were seen outside, the matter was swiftly silenced. After all, a man of such refinement could do no wrong, and if he did, who among them would dare say so? The river itself seemed to hold its breath around his estate. Fishermen avoided the section beneath the manor's cliffs, claiming the water felt colder there, heavier, as though carrying something it wished desperately to forget. Children told tales of a woman seen standing among the magnolias at night, motionless, her face hidden behind a curtain of dark hair. Dogs refused to go near the servant quarters. Lantern flames sputtered for no reason near the east wing. Yet these stories, like so many in such a time, were dismissed as superstition. America was a nation in the throes of expansion, industry, and ambition. There was no room for ghosts, only progress. No ear for whispers, only applause for men like the Baron. And so the seasons turned, cotton grew, Fortunes rose and fell, and within the tall, silent walls of the Baron's estate, the weekly game began. A game the women were forced to play, a game whose rules shifted like shadows, and whose consequences threaded through the very fabric of their lives. A game that would eventually fill the pages of that ledger found in the cellar, the same ledger that seemed to pulse with dread in the lantern light. The land would remember what the people tried to forget. The walls would remember the cries they absorbed. And the river, cold, red, patient, would remember better than anyone. The first woman whose name appears in the ledger is Lila Mae Corbin, written in a trembling cursive that grows tighter with each passing entry. She was born only a few miles from the Baron's estate, though her earliest memories were not of home, but of being traded from one property to another, each transaction erasing a little more of her childhood. When she arrived at the Baron's in the spring of 1819, she was 17, small, soft-spoken, with hair the color of dark molasses, and eyes that always seemed to be measuring the distance to an open door. Those who knew her before described her as quick with a smile, slow with her trust. She rarely raised her voice, but when she sang, her tone carried pure and strong, as though pulled from a well of something older than fear. The Baron noticed that almost immediately. In his first weeks of inspecting his new servants, he stopped in front of her, gloved hand resting on his silver cane. "You, sing something," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. Lila hesitated, glancing at the overseer, who nodded sharply. So she sang, a short verse from an old spiritual her mother once whispered to her. The Baron listened closely, head tilted. When she finished, he tapped the end of his cane twice against the wooden floor. "Good," he murmured. "Your voice will be required." She would later tell another woman in the quarters, "When he looked at me, it felt like he was choosing which part of me belonged to him. Not just my body, something inside." In the cramped sleeping quarters of the East Wing, Lila became the quiet anchor among the women. She braided their hair, mended their skirts, and whispered prayers while rubbing circles into trembling shoulders. When the game began, when the first instructions were posted on the slate wall outside their room, Lila was the first to question it. "This ain't right," she whispered as the others gathered behind her. "Ain't no work task I ever heard of look like this." But no one could speak objections aloud. The overseer stood watching, arms folded, eyes like polished stones. Lila's name appears earliest and most often in the ledger, always written in the same careful, fearful hand, always accompanied by small squares of iron, the tokens for losing rounds in the game. 10. The second major figure woven into the ledger's entries was Mirella, though the Baron called her Mira, softening her name as if doing so softened her circumstances. She came from the Caribbean, purchased through a coastal broker with a reputation for blurring the lines between indentured servitude and outright human trafficking. Mirella was 19 when she arrived, tall, with skin like deep mahogany and a long scar that curved over her left shoulder like a white crescent. She rarely spoke at first, keeping her gaze lowered, but when she did lift her eyes, people often said it felt like she was looking through them rather than at them. The other women both admired and feared her. She carried herself with a hard-earned poise that the Baron immediately took interest in. During her first week, he summoned her to the veranda where he lounged with a glass of dark wine. "Do you understand English?" he asked her. Mirella nodded once. "Good. You will learn more. You will also learn my expectations. Every household runs on order. Do you believe in order?" She held his gaze for a heartbeat longer than he liked. "I believe in survival," she answered quietly. He smiled at that, a thin, dangerous smile. "Then you will do well here." Her presence among the women changed the dynamic in the quarters. She was protective but not sentimental, often reminding the younger ones to conserve their strength and guard their secrets. She noticed patterns, when guards changed shifts, when the Baron's mood soured, when the game's rules subtly shifted. One night, as the women whispered about the strange chalk marks that had appeared on the East Wing hallway walls, Mirella said, "He is watching how we respond. It is all a test to him. Everything is." "But why?" one woman asked. Mirella shook her head slowly. "Because power is a hunger that never ends." Her entries in the ledger are fewer than Lila's, but marked with symbols instead of full iron hands, as though the game's punishments were tailored differently for her. Some historians later speculated that the Baron saw Mirella not as a participant, but as a measure, an anchor he could use to gauge how far fear could bend a person before breaking them. The third prominent figure, one whose name in the ledger appears only late in the chronology, was not a victim but an outsider who would eventually become a witness. Dr. Alistair Hemswell. Newly arrived from Boston, he was hired by the county to serve as a traveling physician for the scattered rural communities. He was young, barely 30, with sandy hair he constantly pushed back and round spectacles that slid down his nose when he examined a patient. Hemswell was soft-spoken, earnest, and wholly unprepared for the reality of southern plantation life. The first time he visited the Baron's estate, he was overwhelmed by the size of the grounds. The Baron greeted him personally at the door with exaggerated politeness. "Doctor, welcome. I trust the journey was comfortable." Hemswell cleared his throat. "A bit long, but manageable." "You will find we take illness seriously here," the Baron said, leading him through the hall. "Order and discipline require healthy bodies." Though the Baron's tone was pleasant, something in the manner felt wrong to Hemswell. The halls were too quiet, the servants' footsteps too measured, the air too heavy with the scent of magnolia and old candle wax. He was eventually brought to examine one of the women, her name unrecorded, who bore bruises shaped not like fists, but like restraints. When Hemswell asked how she was injured, she whispered, "It was the game, sir," before the overseer sharply ordered her silence. That night, Hemswell wrote in his private journal, "Something is happening on that estate, something beyond the usual horrors of this place. I saw fear today, not the fear of punishment, but the fear of ritual." His role would grow in the coming years. He would become a reluctant confidant to some of the women, and later, an unavoidable participant in the unraveling of the Baron's secrets. But for now, he remained an outsider peering into an abyss he could not yet comprehend. Three figures. Lila Mae with her trembling courage, Mirella with her quiet defiance, and Hemswell with his uneasy conscience, all circling the gravity of the Baron's influence, all drawn inexorably into the weekly game that would mark the beginning of the estate's descent into nightmare. The first signs of horror on the Baron's estate came softly, the way a cold draft slips through a window frame, felt before it is seen, understood only in hindsight. To the women confined in the East Wing, it began with small changes in routine, minor at first, but threaded with unease. The nights, once marked simply by exhaustion and silence, grew strangely restless. Lila Mae often woke to a faint tapping, delicate, rhythmic, unnatural, coming from the corridor just beyond their door. At first, she thought it was the shifting of the old wooden beams or the scurrying of mice. But mice did not keep time, and wood did not repeat patterns like someone counting under their breath. Some nights the tapping grew louder, as though the source pressed its ear or its fingers against the very wall dividing them. "You hear it too?" Lila whispered one evening when she found Mirella already awake, sitting upright on her straw mattress, her gaze fixed on the dark doorway. Mirella didn't turn her head. "It follows the same rhythm as the chalk marks he leaves." Lila shivered. "What do you think it means?" "It means he is watching when we sleep, and he is listening when we wake." The chalk marks had appeared 3 weeks earlier, thin vertical lines drawn on the hallway walls at precise intervals, each spaced the width of a hand. The overseer insisted they were structural markers for planned repairs. But the women noticed how the marks multiplied only after the game began, as though the estate itself was being measured not by carpenters, but by something colder, something that assessed the inhabitants rather than the walls. One morning, when the women lined up for work assignments, they found the slate board wiped clean except for a single line in white chalk. Prepare yourselves for the third round. No explanation, no instructions, merely the promise of another test. It unsettled even the seasoned laborers. One of the older women, Ruth Ann, whispered to Lila, "Ain't no round 3 in farm work. This here is something made up. This here is for his amusement." That same afternoon, a gust of wind pushed open the back door of the quarters while they were cooking. A folded paper slid across the floor like a living thing. Morella picked it up before anyone else could. Written in careful script were the names of every woman in the wing, each name paired with a number. "What this supposed to be?" another woman asked. Morella handed the paper to Lila. "Read it." Lila's voice trembled as she scanned it. These numbers are how many tokens we got, or how many we lost, except, look here." Her finger landed on her own name. Lila Mae Corbin. 4. But she only had 2 tokens so far. She kept them hidden in a loose floorboard under her cot. "How he know what we got?" she whispered. Morella answered in a flat voice, "Because he puts them there." A murmur spread through the room, fearful, uncertain, tinged with disbelief. But disbelief died fast on that plantation. Everything the Baron touched warped into something strange. The local rumors began soon after. The first came from a stable hand who told Dr. Hemswell that he'd seen women from the estate walking in circles in the courtyard at dawn. Not working, not speaking, just circling in slow, synchronized steps. "They was moving like they was counting something," the stable hand whispered. "Hands clasped in front, heads down. Not like no prayer I ever seen." "Sleepwalking, perhaps?" Hemswell suggested half-heartedly. "No, sir. They was awake. Awake and following something I couldn't see." A week later, the town pastor, Reverend Keaton, made a cryptic remark from his pulpit during a Sunday sermon. "There are places where the devil does not bother with shadows. He walks openly, wearing a gentleman's face." No one said the Baron's name aloud, but several parishioners shifted uncomfortably in their pews. Meanwhile, the women on the estate began noticing odd, physical signs of the game intensifying. Unexplained bruises in the shape of thin bands around their wrists, patterns of small dots appearing on their arms overnight, and a persistent ache in their joints, as if they had exerted themselves in sleep. One morning, Lila woke to find 3 iron tokens at the foot of her mattress. They were icy to the touch despite the warm room. She hadn't lost any rounds recently. She hadn't earned them. They had simply appeared. When she showed them to Morella, the older woman stared for a long moment before whispering, "Someone wants you deeper in the game." "But why me?" Lila asked. "Because you still got hope," Morella said. "Hope is a dangerous thing. He wants to break that first." As spring bled into summer, the atmosphere in the east wing thickened. Women hesitated before walking past mirrors, swearing they saw fleeting shapes not matching their movements. The stairs to the cellar creaked at the same hour each night. Even the magnolia trees outside began to feel oppressive, their blossoms heavy, their scent cloying enough to choke. Oh, and through it all, the slate board delivered new rules each week, never spoken aloud, never explained by the overseers. Just brief commands. Move in pairs. Do not speak after sundown. Present tokens at dawn. The game was no longer just a ritual. It was becoming a presence, one that moved around them, rearranged their days, pressed invisible fingers against their choices. The first sign that something terrible was accelerating came from a woman named Hester, who stumbled into the quarters one night, her dress torn, her breath shallow, her eyes wide with wild terror. "They moved!" she gasped. "The chalk marks! They moved!" She collapsed before she could say more, trembling like she had run from a ghost, and perhaps she had. The dread that followed would only deepen. The rules would tighten. The nights would grow stranger, and the Baron's intentions would begin to reveal themselves in ways none of them were ready to face. Fear spread through the estate the way infection spreads through the body, quietly at first, then with a fever that could not be ignored. After Hester's collapse, the women refused to sleep, lying awake on their mattresses listening for the faint scrape of chalk against wood. Every creak in the hallway made someone gasp. Every draft felt like a touch. By the end of that week, 3 more women reported seeing chalk lines shift their positions overnight. They swore the markings crept like insects, inch by inch, forming new patterns only the Baron seemed to understand. No overseer admitted to altering them. No servant dared investigate. One humid evening, as candles flickered in the oppressive heat, Lila Mae approached Morella and whispered, "If the chalk moves, who's moving it?" Morella didn't answer. She simply lifted her finger and pointed upward, to the ceiling. Lila swallowed hard. "You saying there's someone up there?" "Someone," Morella murmured, "or something he ordered." That same night, a scream cut through the estate. High, sharp, and abruptly silenced. The women froze. Even the crickets outside seemed to hush in terror. No one dared leave the quarters. No one dared ask who had screamed. But in the morning, a new name appeared on the ledger, one none of the women recognized, a name that had never belonged to anyone on the estate. Sarah Winton, 0 tokens. The number chilled them more than the name. 0 tokens meant the woman hadn't lost any rounds. It meant the game had started for her the moment she arrived. It meant she had already been marked. "Another one," Morella whispered when Lila showed her the ledger. "Another girl he's forcing into this. But who is she?" "They ain't bring nobody new," Lila whispered. "Not that we seen," Morella corrected. Meanwhile, the town began whispering. First it was Marjorie Klein, the baker's wife, who told Reverend Keaton she'd seen something strange while walking near the old bridge. "There was a woman on the Baron's Road," she said quietly. "Barefoot, in a torn dress. She looked lost. No, not lost. Disoriented. Like she ain't know where her body was." "And did you aid her?" the pastor asked. Marjorie looked ashamed. I tried. But when I called to her, she turned her face to me and, Reverend, her eyes were rolled back, like she was sleepwalking with no sleep to walk from." When the pastor later approached the Baron to inquire, the aristocrat simply smiled thinly and replied, "My servants are loyal, Reverend. None would dare wander. Besides, we have no woman matching that description." His assurance silenced the pastor publicly, but privately, he began warning his congregation to avoid the river roads after sundown. Dr. Hemswell, too, felt the creeping wrongness. In his 2nd month serving the region, he was summoned to treat a young woman from the estate, this one named Clara, who bore deep scratches across her arms. When he asked what happened, she only whispered, "It was the dark room." "What room?" Hemswell pressed. She simply shook her head and whispered, "He don't let us talk about it. He says talking costs tokens." The overseer stepped forward sharply. "She's exhausted. No more questions." But Hemswell noticed more. Clara's nails were worn down to the quick, as though she had been clawing at wood or stone. They say the first sound was not the thunder. Later that evening, the doctor recorded in his journal, "Not even the dogs clawing These women are not merely overworked. They are being subjected to conditions that no medical man could justify. Their injuries are controlled, patterned, intentioned. He paused, quill trembling. It feels as though someone is experimenting with fear itself. Rumors spiraled into panic when the miller's son claimed he saw a lantern moving through the magnolia grove near midnight. "Ain't no servant out at that hour," he insisted. And the light, it moved wrong. Too smooth, like it was gliding. Back at the estate, the game tightened around the women like invisible rope. One morning, a new instruction appeared on the slate. Round 5. Present yourselves at the west courtyard. Eyes lowered. No speaking. The women obeyed, forming a shaky line. Lila stood beside Morella, their hands brushing in quiet solidarity. The Baron arrived dressed impeccably, his gloves spotless, his expression calm, as though this gathering were nothing more than a household inspection. "You will perform," he announced, "as you always have. There is nothing to fear if you obey." He paced slowly before them, cane tapping rhythmically on the stone. "Some of you have shown resistance." His gaze drifted to Lila. "Some have shown promise." His gaze lingered on Morella. Morella did not lower her eyes. For a long moment she met his gaze directly, boldly. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. "You will each present your tokens," he said coldly. One by one, the women stepped forward and dropped their iron tokens into his gloved hand. The metallic clinks echoed like a distant tolling bell. When Lila approached, she hesitated. She only had 2 tokens left. They had mysteriously appeared again, replacing the 3 she'd found. She didn't know whether to hand over the one she'd earned or the one she'd been given. The Baron watched her, amused. "Indecision," he said softly, "is the mark of weakness." Lila's hands trembled. I got these 2, sir." He leaned forward. "You had 5 last night." Her heart thudded painfully. "Sir, I don't know about that. I only—" "Lies cost tokens," he said, snapping his fingers. The overseer stepped forward and seized Lila by the wrist. She gasped as cold iron was pressed into her palm. Another token. "One more," the Baron said, "for your confusion." When she rejoined the line, Morella whispered, "He's trying to drown you in them." "Why?" Lila whispered back. "Because tokens ain't rewards," Morella said. "They're marks." That night, as a storm brewed over the estate, the chalk lines in the hallway multiplied. They now formed a complete circle around the women's quarters, each line crossing another in a pattern too precise to be accidental. Hester was the first to notice the circle wasn't static. "It's bigger than last night," she whispered. "Look, the lines moved outward." "Outward?" Lila echoed. "Toward what?" No one answered. The next evening the circle grew again, stretching down the hall, now dividing the east wing into strange geometries. The overseers avoided stepping on the markings. The servants refused to go near that part of the manor at all. Morella, studying the symbols with narrowed eyes, whispered, "This is not carpentry. This is not marking. This is mapping." "What do you mean?" "He's marking us," she said. "Mapping where we walk, where we sleep, where we fear most." The realization settled over them like a cold veil. The Baron wasn't measuring the building. He was measuring the women, their movements, their habits, their fear. Suspicion crept into every corner of Edwin's bluff. Sarah Winton, the mysterious name in the ledger, began appearing in whispered conversations. No one had seen her. No one could confirm she existed at all. One townsman reported seeing a girl near the riverbank who matched the description Marjorie Klein had given. But when he approached, she vanished into the trees, leaving only footprints that abruptly ended as though she'd been swallowed by the earth. Dr. Hemswell, now deeply unsettled, sought guidance from Reverend Keaton. "Reverend," he said during a private visit, "have you noticed anything unusual about the Baron's estate?" Keaton hesitated. Why do you ask? Because I've seen injuries, Hemswell whispered. Patterns of bruising, women too frightened to speak openly. The Reverend lowered his voice. I have heard things, quiet things, strange singing at night, women who appear and disappear near the magnolias. And, he paused, and the Baron's servants have confessed to rituals. Hemswell stiffened. Rituals. Keaton nodded. Ceremonies of obedience, punishments masquerading as divine order. Why haven't you spoken out? Hemswell demanded. The Reverend looked away. Because the Baron funds half the county, because his reach is long, because fear, real fear, makes cowards of decent men. A wind rattled the church windows. What do you think this is? Hemswell whispered. Madness? Abuse? Something worse? The Reverend exhaled slowly. I believe it may be a sickness of the soul, or a hunger, the kind of hunger that grows when a man believes himself untouchable. Back at the estate, fear among the enslaved women became palpable. Hester refused to sleep. Clara began muttering in her dreams, words no one could understand, a strangled mixture of English and something older. Younger girls clung to Morella like frightened children. Then came the night of the lanterns. The women woke to see 3 lanterns hanging in the corridor outside their door, lanterns that flickered with a pale blue flame instead of yellow. No one had placed them there. No footsteps had been heard. Yet the flames burned steadily, as though shielded by unseen hands. Lila whispered, He's watching us. Morella shook her head. No, this ain't watching. This is warning. A sound drifted through the hall, a soft, low humming. Not human, not entirely. Something between a breath and a song. The Baron's voice, distant yet chillingly clear, echoed from the far end of the corridor. Round 6 begins at dawn. The lanterns dimmed simultaneously, their flames reduced to cold, dying embers. And for the first time, Morella's calm facade cracked. She whispered, barely audible, We ain't gonna survive much longer if we don't understand what he's playing at. The game was no longer just a ritual of control. It was becoming something deeper, something ritualistic, something designed to break not merely bodies, but the very fabric of the women's minds. The town felt the shift, too. Dogs howling at unseen things, rivers running colder, lights moving in the magnolia grove. Rumors spread that the Baron's ancestors had practiced strange customs in the old world, rites involving selection, obedience, fear. Whispers became panic. Panic became suspicion. Suspicion became the first cracks in the wall of silence surrounding the Baron's cruelty. What do you think guilty souls cursed by God or victims of madness? Tell us below. Your theories matter here. Dawn broke over the estate with a sickly, gray light, the kind that made every shadow appear deeper, longer, more sentient. The women stood in the courtyard for round 6, trembling, sleep-starved, their thin dresses clinging to their skin in the heavy humidity. Even the magnolias, usually bursting with sweet, lush scent, smelled strangely metallic, as though something had bled into the soil overnight. The Baron stepped onto the veranda with an almost ceremonial slowness. His boots were polished to a mirror shine, his gloves immaculate, his cane gleaming beneath the fractured sunlight. But it was his expression that froze the women. Calm, poised, but with a sharpness in his eyes like he had been waiting years for this specific moment. You may wonder why the game persists, he announced. Why its rules evolve. Why you are chosen. He descended the veranda steps, each tap of his cane echoing like a judge's gavel. It is simple, he continued. Order cannot exist without obedience, and obedience cannot be measured unless it is tested. He stopped directly before Lila Mae. And you, my dear, he said softly, have proven inconsistent. Morella stepped forward instinctively, placing herself half a pace ahead of Lila. The movement was small, but bold, far bolder than any woman on the estate had dared in the Baron's presence. The Baron's head tilted. "Defiance," he murmured. "How refreshing." He lifted his glove and brushed the air near Morella's cheek, not touching her, but close enough that she flinched. His smile widened. "Round 6, he said, turning to all of them, "is about truth." He gestured toward the groundskeeper's shed. 2 overseers dragged out a heavy wooden chest, one nearly identical to the coffer discovered a century later, its iron bindings clinking ominously. When they opened the lid, the women recoiled. Inside were dozens of iron tokens, not pristine, not new, used. Some bore scratches from nails, others were stained with something darker. The Baron motioned for each woman to take one. "Your task," he said, "is to return these tokens to their rightful owners." The women exchanged frightened looks. None knew what he meant. None understood the rightful owners. The Baron simply turned and began walking toward the magnolia grove. "Follow." They obeyed. As they entered the grove, the air grew unnaturally still. The leaves overhead blocked out the morning sun, casting a shadowy canopy that swallowed sound. The path curved in an unfamiliar pattern, one none of the women had seen before, despite years of laboring the grounds. "Where are we going?" Hester whispered. No one answered, not even Morella. Finally, the path opened into a clearing. The women froze. In the center stood a ring of old stones, weathered, moss-eaten, arranged in a perfect circle large enough for 20 people. At first glance, they looked like remnants of some ancient structure. But as the women drew closer, they realized each stone bore carvings, names, dates, symbols resembling the chalk marks from the hallway. Lila's breath hitched. "Those are women's names." Morella crouched to examine one stone. "This one here," she said softly, "got a date from before he came to this land." Another woman whispered, Couldn't be that old." The Baron stepped into the center of the circle. "These stones," he announced, "honor past participants of the game. Women who showed loyalty. Women who earned their release." Release. The word twisted like a blade. Morella whispered, "Release to where? Ain't nobody ever left this place." The Baron lifted his cane. "Place your tokens at the foot of the stone that calls to you." Calls to you. The phrase prickled their skin. One by one, the women hesitantly moved forward. Clara approached a stone carved with the initials CT. Hester gravitated to one with markings that resembled scratches. But when Lila stepped forward, she froze. A stone near the outer ring bore her name. Lila Mae Corbin, 1819. Blank space. Her breath caught in her throat. The women behind her gasped. The Baron smiled thinly. "As you see," he said, "your place was prepared long ago." Morella grabbed Lila's hand. "Don't touch it," she hissed. But the Baron's voice sliced through the grove. "Place the token." Lila's hand trembled violently. Morella whispered, "If you do this, you give him something he can't take back." "But if I don't," Lila's voice cracked. "He can't kill us all," Morella muttered. "Not with a doctor visiting, not with townsfolk watching." But the Baron heard her. "Kill?" he repeated, amused. "My dear Morella, why would I kill what belongs to me?" He stepped closer. "You are not here to die. You are here to obey." He leaned forward until Lila could feel his breath on her cheek. "Place it," he whispered. Her hand lowered involuntarily, token hovering inches above the carved name. Then a scream tore through the grove. All heads snapped toward the path. Sarah Winton stood there. or something that was Sarah Winton. Her hair hung in tangled ropes over her face. Her dress was torn, stained with mud and river water. Her feet were bare and bleeding. Her arms twitched as though her joints didn't move correctly, and her eyes, blank, unseeing, white as if rolled back permanently. She staggered into the clearing, voice croaking, "Not her, not Lila." Women shrieked. Overseers stepped back in horror. Even the Baron froze, if only for a fraction of a heartbeat. Morella pulled Lila backward. "Don't touch nothing! We need to run!" But the Baron lifted his cane and slammed it into the ground. Sarah collapsed instantly, as though her strings had been cut. The soil trembled. A low hum rose from the stones, vibrating through the women's feet. Lila screamed. "Stop! What are you doing to her?" The Baron's voice was calm, clinical. "She disobeyed her round. This is her consequence." Dr. Hemswell, who had arrived moments earlier after hearing the screams from afar, burst into the clearing. "What in God's name is happening here?" His eyes fell on Sarah's crumpled body. Horror overtook him. "This woman is dying," he cried, dropping to his knees beside her. The Baron said nothing. He simply stared with cold indifference. Hemswell hissed, "You monster!" But before he could finish, Sarah's head jerked upward. Her mouth moved like she was trying to form words. Finally, in a strangled, agonized whisper, "Run!" Her body seized violently, then went still. Lila clapped a hand over her mouth, sobbing. The other women backed away, trembling. The Baron sighed as though inconvenienced. "Round 6, he said, "is concluded." He turned toward the manor as if nothing had occurred. But no one followed him. Not this time. Morella stepped forward, eyes burning with fury. "You ain't human," she said softly, "and this place ain't a home. It's a grave." The Baron turned his head slightly, giving her a sidelong glance. "Careful," he murmured. "Round 7 begins at dusk." It was the first time any woman dared walk out of the clearing without waiting to be dismissed. One by one, they followed Morella, past the stones, past Sarah's body, past the Baron. Lila didn't look back. She couldn't. That night the storms rolled in fast, thunder rattling the windows of the east wing. The hallway chalk marks now formed a near-perfect circle around the entire wing, far larger than before, the lines glowing faintly in the candlelight as if warmed from within. Hester whispered, "I think they match the pattern of the stones." Morella nodded grimly. "He's bringing the grove inside." Lila shuddered. "But why?" "Because round 7, Morella said, "ain't meant to be outside." Lightning flashed, illuminating a figure standing at the end of the hallway. At first they thought it was the Baron. But as the thunder faded, they realized it was Sarah Winton. Her body twisted, half slumped, her head hanging at an unnatural angle. She took a step forward, then another. Lila screamed. Morella grabbed her arm. "Don't look at her! Don't!" But it was too late. Sarah's mouth opened. Wider, wider. Far too wide for a human jaw. A sound poured out. A low, throbbing hum that felt like it vibrated the bones inside their skulls. The women fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Lila cried out, "Make it stop, please!" Then the hum ceased. Footsteps approached from behind Sarah's body. The Baron stepped into view, serene, composed, his gloves unblemished. "Ladies," he said softly, "round 7 has begun." Lightning struck again, bathing his face in a stark, hellish glow. "If you stood in that room," he whispered, "would you call it crime or sacrifice? Leave your answer." The storm did not pass. It settled over the estate like a living creature, coiling its darkness around the magnolia trees, pressing its weight against the walls of the east wing. Thunder rolled in long, slow murmurs, as though echoing footsteps inside the clouds. The women huddled together, trembling, their candlelight shaking as the wind clawed at the shutters. Round 7 had begun. And the Baron never lied about his rounds. Not once. The corridor still glowed faintly with the chalk markings, but now they pulsed, slowly, dimly, like veins lit by some inner fire. The glowing lines framed the hallway where Sarah Winton's twisted body still stood hunched, swaying slightly in the stale air, her blank eyes fixed ahead. Behind her, the Baron's silhouette loomed. The women tried to scatter, but their legs refused to obey. It was as if the chalk itself held them. Lila felt her lungs tighten. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. She grabbed Morella's wrist. "What is this? What's he doing to us?" Morella's voice was taut with terror. "Something old. Something meant to bind. Don't let your mind break, Lila. That's what he wants." "Bind?" Lila choked. "Bind how?" But Morella's gaze was fixed on the Baron. "By making us part of his design." The Baron took one graceful step forward, his cane tapping softly against the floorboards. The sound was gentle, but in the unnatural silence it echoed like a hammer striking bone. "Do not be afraid," he said. "Round 7 is the most important." Rain battered the windows, drowning out every sound except his voice. "You have been weighed, measured, tested. Each of you has shown resilience." His eyes lingered on Morella, some more than others. He stepped beside Sarah's limp form and placed 2 fingers against her temple. Sarah was not resilient. The body jerked sharply. A moan escaped her throat, wet, fragile, torn from somewhere deep inside her. Lila covered her mouth to stifle a scream. Tears streamed down her face. "What do you want from us?" she cried. The Baron turned toward her, moving with a calm that was more terrifying than rage. "What all masters want," he replied, "but few are skilled enough to obtain." He walked closer, until he stood only inches from Lila. "Absolute obedience, absolute precision. A house cannot run on chaos. It must run on ritual." Then he leaned down, his breath warm against her ear. "And rituals require sacrifice." Morella stepped between them in a flash, shoving the Baron backward. "You ain't taking her," she hissed. For the first time, something like genuine amusement flickered across the Baron's face. "My dear Morella," he murmured, brushing off his coat, "you misunderstand. I do not take, I choose, and the chosen must offer willingly." He turned and pointed his cane toward the glowing chalk circle. "Tonight," he announced, "one of you will complete the circle." The women murmured in terror. "What that mean?" Hester whimpered. "Who completes it?" Clara whispered. The Baron smiled. "The one who stops resisting." A gust of wind blasted through the hall, extinguishing the candles. Darkness swallowed them, thick, suffocating, absolute. Then the glow intensified. The chalk lines lit the hall with a cold blue light, bright enough to cast sharp, unnatural shadows on the walls. Sarah's twisted form jerked forward violently, like a puppet being yanked by an unseen hand. Her mouth opened again, wider than before, and the low, bone-deep hum vibrated through the floor. The women dropped to their knees, hands over their ears. The sound wasn't loud, but it pierced straight into their skulls. Morella grabbed Lila, pulling her close, shielding her with her body. "Fight it," she whispered fiercely. "He can't control you if your mind don't give in." But Lila felt her thoughts slipping, replaced by images she had never seen, memories she didn't own. Women walking in circles beneath moonlight. stones carved with names, figures kneeling in supplication around an ancient altar. "What is he showing us?" Lila sobbed. "His history," Morella whispered. "His rituals, the ones his family passed down." Footsteps thundered down the hall, heavy, human footsteps. Dr. Hemswell burst into the corridor. "Move away from them," he shouted at the Baron. "Whatever this is, stop." The Baron turned his head calmly. "Doctor," he said, "I warned you not to interfere." "You're torturing them," Hemswell cried, pushing past the chalk line, only to stumble as though he'd hit a wall of air. The chalk glowed brighter where he attempted to cross it. "You may observe," the Baron said softly, "but not intervene." Sarah's body jerked once more, then collapsed to the floor with a wet thud. The humming stopped. A crushing silence followed. The Baron lifted his cane. "Stand," he commanded. The women rose slowly, trembling, as if pulled upward by an invisible thread. Lila's vision blurred. Her thoughts felt detached from her own mind. Morella clutched her hand tighter. "No," Morella whispered. "Don't follow his voice." But the Baron spoke again. "Lila Mae Corbin," he said gently. "Step forward." Lila's feet moved on their own. Morella yanked her backward. "No, she ain't part of this." Hemswell shook the chalk line, trying to break through. "Lila, don't listen." The Baron exhaled softly, almost wistfully. "You all misunderstand," he said. "This is not punishment. This is ascent." He tapped his cane 3 times. A deep, hollow boom reverberated through the floor, like a heartbeat. The chalk lines surged with light. The hallway dissolved. The women found themselves standing in a vast chamber, one they had never seen, one that could not exist within the physical boundaries of the manor. The walls stretched high above them, covered in carvings matching those on the stones in the grove. The air smelled of earth, metal, and something ancient. It felt like stepping inside a ritual circle carved beneath the skin of the world. Lila gasped. Where are we?" Morella whispered. "He's dragging us somewhere he's made, somewhere that ain't real, or ain't supposed to be." The Baron appeared at the far end of the chamber, though none had seen him walk there. "This," he said, spreading his arms, "is where the game ends, and where my work continues." Behind him, a raised stone platform glowed faintly. On it lay dozens of iron tokens, arranged in a spiral pattern. The women stared at it in horror. "That's," Clara whispered. "That's all of ours." The Baron nodded. "Each token represents a choice made, a rule obeyed, a rule broken. Each one binds you further to the order." "The order?" Hemswell echoed, horrified. "My lineage," the Baron clarified. "My inheritance, a ritual of binding perfected over centuries. Its origin, a question older than this land." He touched the edge of the platform. The tokens began to vibrate. Lila staggered backward, clutching her chest as though something inside her shifted. "What's happening to me?" she cried. "Your mark," the Baron said. "Your stone recognized you." Morella shoved Lila behind her. "She ain't yours." The Baron's smile sharpened. "Then why does her name appear in a circle carved before her birth?" The women gasped. Even Hemswell faltered. But that's impossible," Lila choked. "Not impossible," the Baron said. "Merely predestined." He reached into his coat and withdrew the ledger. The same ledger discovered in the cellar a century later. The same ledger whose ink never faded. He opened it. Blank pages filled themselves with writing. Names, symbols, patterns. Lila's name glowed. "You were chosen long before you drew breath," the Baron said softly. A lineage of obedience, a cycle of sacrifice, and tonight, his voice deepened unnaturally. The cycle completes. Morella screamed, "I ain't letting you take her!" She lunged forward, and the chalk circle flared with blinding white light. Her body froze mid-motion, suspended as though caught in invisible threads. "Morella!" Lila cried. The Baron approached, touching a finger to Morella's forehead. "You," he said, "were never meant to interfere. Your will is strong, but strength without obedience," he sighed, "is wasteful." Lila sobbed. "Stop! Please, stop!" The Baron turned. "You have one task," he said. "One choice to complete the circle." A final glowing token appeared in his palm. "For round 7, he whispered, "you must place this token at your own stone." "Willingly." Lila trembled violently. "And if I don't?" she whispered. The Baron stepped closer. "Then Mirella takes your place." Morella's immobilized eyes widened in terror. Hemswell shouted, "Lila, don't! This is madness! He can't—" But the Baron silenced him with a flick of his cane. Silence fell. Lila looked at the token, then at the Baron, then at Mirella. Her hands shook so hard she nearly dropped it. Finally, she whispered, "I ain't letting you hurt her." And she stepped toward the glowing stone with her name carved into it. The Baron watched, smiling. Mirella screamed soundlessly in the frozen air. Hemswell pounded against the barrier. Lila lifted the token. Her breath hitched. Her hand lowered, just inches from the stone. The air crackled. The chamber shook. Her fingers trembled. Then everything went black. When vision returned, it did so in fragments, flashes of dim light, muffled sobbing, the slow drip of water echoing through stone. Lila's body felt heavy, pinned to the earth by a pressure she could not name. For a moment she didn't know if she was alive, dreaming, or drifting somewhere between the two. Her eyes fluttered open. The chamber was gone. The glowing chalk, the spiral of tokens, the impossible walls, they had vanished like smoke dispersed by a sudden wind. Now she lay on the cold floor of the east wing hallway. The boards were damp beneath her cheek. The storm outside still raged, its thunder shaking dust loose from the rafters. But something was wrong. The hallway was empty. No women. No Mirella. No Hemswell. No Sarah's corpse. No Baron. Just Lila, alone in the ghostly blue flicker of dying candlelight. She pushed herself upright, chest heaving. Her head throbbed like it had been split open and crudely stitched back together. "Mirella?" she whispered, voice cracking. Only silence answered. She staggered to her feet, gripping the wall for balance. The chalk lines were faint now, as though rubbed away by unseen hands. The air felt thick and stale. Every shadow looked wrong, stretched, elongated, as if the darkness clung too tightly to the walls. Lila moved slowly down the corridor, calling names with growing desperation. "Hester, Clara, anybody?" Nothing. Only when she reached the end of the hall did she hear it, faint breathing coming from behind the old supply door. She rushed toward the sound and wrenched the door open. Mirella collapsed into her arms. Her body was trembling violently, soaked in sweat, as though she had been pulled from a fever dream. "Lila," she choked. "Lila, I thought you was gone." Lila crushed her into a tight embrace. "You ain't hurt? Please tell me you ain't hurt." Mirella shakily shook her head. No, he didn't touch me. I woke up in here locked in. I've been banging on that door for what feel like hours." "You remember what happened?" Lila whispered. Morella's eyes darkened. "I remember the light, and you reaching for your stone, and then something grabbed me from behind, like hands made of smoke. Next thing I knew, I was here." Lila swallowed hard. Where's the others? Morella shook her head. Tears streamed silently down her face. I don't know. A sound echoed through the hall, slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the direction of the kitchen. Lila's heart lurched. The Baron. She grabbed Morella's hand and pulled her into a side corridor, pressing their backs against the wall. The footsteps grew louder, heel and cane tapping in perfect tandem. Then, through the dim light, Dr. Hemswell appeared. He stumbled into view, face pale as chalk, spectacles cracked, coat torn at the sleeve. His hands trembled violently. "Doctor!" Lila cried, rushing toward him. He flinched as she touched his arm, then sagged with relief. "You're alive," he whispered. "Thank God. I searched everywhere. The women, they're—" He choked on the words. "Gone," Morella finished, voice shaking. Hemswell nodded miserably. "The Baron. He took them somewhere, but not through any door I could find. The East Wing layout, it's changed. Rooms shifted, walls where none existed, hallways shortened." Lila felt her knees weaken. "He moved the house again." Hemswell looked at her with wide, horrified eyes. "What do you mean again?" Morella answered. "He been shifting walls for weeks. Sometimes a room ain't where it used to be. Sometimes a stairwell leads you someplace else. He ain't just playing games with us. He's rearranging the whole place." Hemswell exhaled shakily. "This is beyond cruelty. This is madness. Architecture cannot change form. Not unless he wants it to," Lila murmured. Lightning flashed through the hall, casting a blinding white glow. And in that instant, all three saw it. The Baron stood at the far end of the corridor, silent, still, smiling. He wore no coat now. His shirt sleeves were rolled neatly to his elbows. His gloves were gone, revealing hands that were far too pale, almost translucent, like thin porcelain lit from within by faint blue light. He raised one hand in greeting. "Good evening," he said softly. "I see some of you remain." Morella stepped forward, shielding Lila behind her. "Where are the others?" she demanded. "What you done with them?" The Baron's smile did not waver. "They have completed their part of the circle." Lila gasped. "Completed? What does that mean?" The Baron tapped his cane lightly against the floor, though it was unclear how it had returned to his hand. "It means," he said calmly, "that the game is nearly finished." Hemswell stepped between the women and the Baron. "You cannot do this," he growled. "I am a physician. I will testify. I will expose every vile thing you've done." The Baron blinked, slowly, almost pityingly. "Physician," he said, "you understand nothing. You see wounds and think them injuries. You see rituals and think them cruelty. You see my work and think it evil." His eyes glowed faintly. "But what I am doing here will outlive all of you." The storm shook the manor with a roar. "Round 8, he said, "requires only the chosen." Morella spat at his feet. "Ain't nobody chosen you." The Baron leaned forward, smiling wider. "Wrong." His eyes fixed on Lila. "She is." A cold numbness spread through Lila's limbs. "No," she whispered. "No, I ain't. I ain't special. I ain't chosen. I ain't part of this." "You were marked long before you were born," the Baron said. "Destiny is not something the chosen escape." Morella yelled. "She ain't going with you." She grabbed Lila's hand and pulled her back toward the servant stairs. But the hallway shifted. In an instant, the corridor twisted sideways, its walls stretching and collapsing like lungs inhaling. The doorways vanished, the windows sealed, the floor rippled beneath their feet. "No, no!" Morella shouted. "He's closing it!" The Baron stepped forward. "Do not resist," he murmured. "Resistance only delays the inevitable." Lila screamed as the chalk lines reappeared on the floor, glowing brighter, spiraling inward like a whirlpool of light. The air hummed, vibrating through her teeth. Morella clung to her. "Stay with me! Don't let go!" Hemswell tried to reach them, but the floor split, opening a chasm of darkness between him and the women. "Morella! Lila! Jump!" he cried. But the darkness surged upward, tendrils of shadow wrapping around Hemswell's legs and dragging him backward. "No!" Lila screamed. "No! Don't take him! Don't!" The Baron raised a single hand. The swirling chalk circle ignited. Morella screamed in agony. Hemswell disappeared into the shadow. And Lila felt herself pulled toward the center of the spiral, as if her very soul were being reeled like thread from her body. Her vision blurred. Her ears rang. Her heartbeat slowed. The Baron's voice echoed, "Round 8 begins now." Then blackness. Cold and total. Not like fainting. Not like sleep. Something older. Something waiting. Something opening. Something she was never meant to survive. Lila woke to the sound of dripping. Slow, deliberate, echoing. Not water, something thicker. The darkness around her was total, but it had texture. It felt alive, as though she lay inside the lungs of something immense and breathing. When she tried to move, her limbs answered slowly, as if pushing through deep mud. The air tasted like rust and damp stone. A faint blue glow flickered somewhere far ahead. "Mirella," she whispered. Her voice sounded swallowed by the dark. Then, movement behind her, fast, sharp. She spun, heart hammering, but saw nothing. Only the darkness, shifting. A soft voice drifted from the glow. "Lila, is that you?" It was Morella. Lila stumbled toward the light, fingertips brushing against slick walls. After several steps, the darkness thinned enough for her to see. Morella stood in a small circular chamber carved from stone older than any in the manor. Her dress was torn. Her lip bled. Her breath shook. But she was alive. "Thank God," Lila sobbed, embracing her. Morella clutched Lila fiercely. "I thought you was dead. I thought he took you for good." "I ain't going nowhere," Lila whispered. "Not without you." Their relief shattered at the sound of a cane tapping behind them. Tap, tap, tap. They froze. The Baron emerged from the darkness, illuminated in faint blue. Yet he seemed cleaner than before, untouched by the grime of the chamber. His pale hands folded calmly behind his back. "You have crossed the threshold," he murmured. "Few ever do." "Where are we?" Lila rasped. "In the foundation beneath my estate," the Baron said. "A place built by those who came before me. A place reserved for round 8. Morella stepped between Lila and the Baron. "What do you want from her?" "Why her?" The Baron inhaled deeply, almost reverently. "She is the final stone." Lila's skin turned to ice. The what?" "You saw the circle in the grove," he said. "You saw the stones carved with names. Each marks a woman who completed the ritual, each one bound order to this land." His eyes glowed faintly. Over a century, the lineage was broken, the chain incomplete, the circle weakened. He stepped closer, boots silent. "But your name appeared, Lila Mae Corbin, carved before your birth, called by blood older than you can imagine." "I ain't part of no bloodline of yours," Lila cried. "You misunderstand," he whispered. "The line is not mine. It is hers." Lila blinked. "Whose?" The Baron extended his hand toward the darkness behind them. Figures appeared. Women, dozens, maybe hundreds, standing silently in the shadows. Their outlines flickered like smoke, but their faces were unmistakable. Sarah Winton, Clara, Hester. Women Lila never knew. Generations of them. All with the same hollow, glowing eyes. All watching her. Morella choked. Dear God. The Baron's voice softened with reverence. Your lineage, Lila. Those bound to the circle before you. Those who kept order. They have been waiting for the one who would complete it. No, Lila staggered back. Do not fear them, the Baron said softly. They are your predecessors. Your inheritance. Morella shoved Lila behind her. You ain't taking her. I don't care what you call this. I don't care what you think she owes. You ain't taking her. The Baron smiled, almost sadly. You cannot protect her from destiny. Morella bared her teeth. Watch me. She lunged. It was hopeless. The Baron didn't even move. He simply lifted one hand, and a surge of force slammed Morella backward into the wall. She hit hard, crumpling, gasping. Lila screamed. Morella! The Baron turned to her gently. You see, resistance leads only to suffering. Lila knelt beside Morella, sobbing. Please, don't hurt her. I'll do anything. The Baron's eyes brightened. There it is, he whispered. Willingness. The chamber walls trembled. The glowing women stepped forward, forming a circle around Lila, their feet silent on the stone. They raised their hands in eerie unison, palms outward, as though offering her to something unseen. The Baron gestured to the center of the chamber. A stone pedestal rose from the floor, smooth, ancient, glowing with the same markings as the gravestones. Lila's name was already carved upon it, freshly, perfectly, waiting. No, Lila sobbed. Please, don't make me. You were born for this, the Baron said. Your blood carries the last fragment of the original line. With you, the circle becomes whole. I'm just a woman, she cried. Ain't nothing special about me. You are the keystone, he said. The one who binds those before and after. I don't want this. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. Destiny does not require your want, only your presence. And then, the chamber ceiling split. A column of cold blue light poured down, illuminating the pedestal. The glowing women murmured softly, their voices blending into a haunting, rhythmic chant. Morella dragged herself upright, clutching her side, eyes burning with rage. Lila, don't you touch that stone, she croaked. Don't you do it. Lila looked at her, at the Baron, at the women, at the pedestal carved with her name. Her body shook uncontrollably. I ain't got a choice. You do, Morella rasped. You always got a choice. The Baron frowned. Enough. He raised his hand, and something snapped inside Lila. Not fear, not resignation. Something older, something fierce. She snatched Morella's hand and screamed, Run! The chamber roared as blue light exploded outward, shattering the ritual circle. Women's ghostly figures burst into sparks. The pedestal cracked. The ground shook violently. The Baron's expression collapsed into pure fury. No, he hissed. She is mine. The women sprinted into the collapsing darkness as stone shattered and walls fell away, revealing a cavern maze beneath the estate. Behind them, the Baron's voice thundered, The circle will be completed. You cannot escape what you are. Lila didn't look back. She ran until her legs gave out, until her lungs screamed, until the chamber was lost behind twisting tunnels. The storm outside roared through cracks in the ceiling. And somewhere behind them, the Baron's footsteps approached again, slow, steady, relentless. Lila, Morella whispered, clutching her hand. We gotta get out. We gotta warn folks. We gotta... A stone fell from above, nearly crushing them. Lila sobbed. "We ain't making it out alive." Morella squeezed her hand. "If we die fightin', not obeyin', not for him." Lila nodded through her tears. "Okay." They turned toward the flicker of distant daylight filtering through the tunnels and began crawling, climbing, clawing their way toward escape while behind them, the Baron's voice echoed through the darkness. "You were chosen, Lila Mae. And the chosen always return." The light grew brighter. The exit, almost in reach. But the Baron's footsteps were getting closer. Much closer. Lila and Morella scrambled toward the thin shaft of gray daylight cutting through the stone, an opening no wider than a crawl space, wedged between slabs of earth that seemed ready to collapse with every tremor. The storm above groaned through the cracks, thunder rattling loose dust into their eyes and throats. "Hurry," Morella rasped, pushing Lila upward. "Go first. I'll be right behind you." Lila clawed at the wet stone, pulling herself toward the fading light. Her nails split. Her knees scraped raw, but she forced herself upward, desperation lending strength her body didn't own. Behind her, Morella shoved hard, teeth gritted, ignoring the rocks biting into her palms. Another thunderous boom shook the tunnel. Not thunder. A voice. The Baron's voice. "Lila Mae," he crooned, his words echoing through the labyrinth like silk wrapping around their throats. "The circle calls for you. Every moment you run only deepens the bond." Morella spat. "Ain't no bond but the one you force on folks." Her voice bounced off the stone, swallowed by darkness. "You misunderstand what force is," the Baron replied softly. "Come back, child. Return to your destiny." Lila clawed harder. His footsteps were closer now, unnaturally close. He wasn't running. He wasn't even rushing. He moved like the tunnels obeyed him, shifting to shorten the distance. "Lila, move!" Morella cried. A stone slab tumbled, crashing behind them, narrowly missing her. Lila cried out, pulling herself into the narrow gap. As she reached the lip, her fingers finally caught the edge of open air. She gasped at the sensation. Cold wind, wet soil, the scent of storm and magnolia. After so long in the suffocating dark, it felt like touching freedom. She pulled herself through. Her head broke into daylight. The world above was wild. Wind thrashing the trees, rain lashing the ground in silver sheets. Magnolia branches whipped like frantic hands. The estate's fields were a blur of swaying crops and rising mist. But the air was clean, alive, free. She turned back, reaching into the hole. "Morella, take my hand." Morella climbed after her, fingers brushing Lila's. Then something yanked her downward. Lila screamed. "No!" She grabbed Morella's wrist with both hands as the unseen force dragged her back toward the darkness. Morella's nails dug into Lila's arm, her face twisted in pain and terror. "He's got my legs," Morella gasped. "Lila, don't let go." "I ain't letting go," Lila sobbed. "I ain't." But the pull strengthened. Morella's body slammed against the tunnel floor, dragged backward by invisible hands. Her fingers slipped. "No, no, no!" Lila cried, tightening her grip. A pale shape emerged below. The Baron's face appeared in the gloom, calm, unmarred, his eyes glowing faintly with cold blue light. "You are prolonging the inevitable," he said softly. "Release her." "Never!" Lila screamed, pulling harder. Morella gasped. "Lila, listen to me. He ain't taking both of us. You gotta go. You gotta warn people." "I won't leave you," Lila sobbed. "I can't." Something jerked Morella downward, twisting her body unnaturally. She screamed, eyes wide with pain. "You can," she whispered, tears mixing with the rain dripping into the hole. "And you will survive for me." "No, don't say that. Don't." Morella managed a trembling smile. You the bravest of us all. You the hope he can't break. Now run." Before Lila could respond, Morella tore her own hand free and disappeared into the darkness. Lila shrieked, plunging her arm into the tunnel, clawing blindly. "Morella!" Her voice tore through her throat. "Morella!" Silence. Then the Baron's voice. "She has made her choice." A burst of cold wind slammed the opening shut, stone and dirt collapsing, sealing the tunnel like a wound closing. Lila fell backward into the mud, sobbing, clawing at the earth. "No, no, please, Morella." Rain battered her face, mixing with tears as she screamed at the sky. Lightning exploded across the estate. Somewhere beneath her feet, faint like a memory, the Baron whispered, "Round 8 is not finished." Lila ran. For the first time in her life, she ran without fear of overseers, without fear of punishment, without fear of dying. She sprinted across the overgrown fields, mud splashing up her legs, her breath burning in her chest. Every step tore pain through her, but she ran anyway. Behind her, thunder cracked, the manor shaking violently as if something inside it had awakened. A distant roar echoed from the earth, deep enough to vibrate her bones. She didn't look back. Not even once. She reached the tree line at the far edge of the estate just as the storm reached its peak. Branches bent like bowing giants overhead. The wind howled through the woods, urging her onward. Ahead lay the narrow dirt road leading to town. To Edwin's Bluff. To help. To hope. She sprinted down the road, crying, gasping, stumbling, her bare feet bleeding from stones and roots. Her dress clung to her like a second skin, torn by branches, soaked with sweat and rain. When the church steeple appeared through the trees, she collapsed to her knees. The world spun, her vision blurred. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was a distant voice, familiar, desperate, terrified. "Dear God, Lila! Lila! Someone help! Fetch the doctor!" Then blackness swallowed her again. When she awoke, soft lamplight glowed above her. The smell of herbs and clean linen filled her nose. She lay on a narrow bed covered by a wool blanket. Her head throbbed. Her body ached. A voice spoke beside her. "Easy now. Don't try to sit up. Dr. Hemswell." Lila jerked in fear, eyes wide. Doctor, it's him. He's coming. Hemswell gently laid a hand on her arm. "You're safe. Listen to me. You're safe here." Safe. The word felt foreign. She looked around. She was inside the church vestry, the walls lined with hymnals and old wooden shelves. Reverend Keaton stood nearby, hands shaking as he whispered a prayer under his breath. Lila clutched Hemswell's sleeve. "The women," she sobbed. "He took them. He took Morella. He tried to take me too." Hemswell's eyes filled with horror and guilt. "I know, or I feared as much." Reverend Keaton stepped forward. "Child, what happened in that house?" Lila's voice broke. "He ain't a man, not like other men. He got rituals, circles, walls that move. He got women trapped under the ground, women from long before I was born." The Reverend crossed himself, trembling. He marked me," she whispered. "Said I belonged to the circle. Said I was the last one." Hemswell tightened his jaw. "We'll get help. The sheriff." "No," Lila cried, grabbing his hand. "You don't understand. Ain't no sheriff can stand against him. He got power, real power. The house listens to him. The land listens to him. Even the dead—" Her voice cracked. "Doctor, he took Morella." Hemswell's face crumpled. I'm so sorry." A heavy silence fell. Outside, the storm began to subside, leaving only distant rumbles behind the hills. Reverend Keaton whispered. This is an abomination, something older than wickedness. Lila stared at them, eyes red and swollen. We gotta go back, she whispered. We gotta save them. Hemswell shook his head slowly. If we go back now, we die. Lila's voice hardened. Then we go back with help. The Reverend swallowed. What kind of help? Lila lifted her gaze. Everyone. The doctor and the pastor exchanged a troubled look. Then Lila spoke the words that would ignite the slow, inevitable unraveling of the Baron's empire. We gather the town, and we burn that house to the ground. The rain did not stop the townsfolk from gathering. Word spread through Edwin's Bluff like wildfire. Lila Mae Corbin escaped the Baron's estate alive. In a place where gossip moved faster than the river itself, the story twisted with every retelling. Some claimed she had crawled from a grave. Others whispered she had been carried to the church by spirits. A few muttered she was demon-touched. But when the people saw her, thin, bruised, trembling, eyes hollow with a terror no girl should ever carry, something shifted in them. Something ancient. Something communal. Fear and fury. Dr. Hemswell insisted she remain in the vestry, resting. But Lila would not sleep, not with Morella still trapped underground, not with the other women screaming in her memory, not with the Baron's voice still echoing inside her skull. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the glowing stones, the spiraling tokens, the women chanting in the circle, and Mirella's hand slipping from hers. She forced herself to sit up despite her pain. How many people here now? She asked Hemswell. The doctor sighed. More than 50, farmers, mill workers, some of the fishermen. Even the sheriff came. Lila's heart clenched. Where's Reverend Keaton? Speaking with the sheriff, Hemswell answered, trying to convince him this isn't a matter the state can handle. Lila swung her legs off the bed. Her body screamed in protest, but she pushed herself to her feet. The doctor tried to stop her, but she jerked away. I ain't laying down while he still got him, she snapped. He'll hurt more, or worse. She limped toward the church doors. The moment she stepped outside, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lanterns dotted the muddy road. The storm clouds still hung low, but the rain had weakened to a cold drizzle. Is that her? Lord have mercy. She's barely standing. She escaped that house? Lila looked out at the sea of faces, men, women, even older children, every one of them watching her as if she'd returned from the grave. Reverend Keaton stepped forward. Lila, be careful. You've been through more than any soul should bear. She raised her chin, despite the tremor in her body. You gonna help me? She asked, voice raw. Or you gonna pray till he takes every woman in this county too? A gasp ran through the crowd. The sheriff, a broad-shouldered man with a stern mustache, approached her slowly. Girl, he said gruffly, I ain't sure what kind of devilry you seen, but you ain't marching back to that estate alone, not while I hold this badge. Lila stared into his eyes. You gonna fight him with that badge? She whispered. 'Cause down there, ain't no badges, ain't no law, ain't no God but the one he pretends to be. Silence. The sheriff swallowed hard. Reverend Keaton cleared his throat. We go with faith, we go with numbers, we go with fire. At that word, fire, something stirred in the crowd. Men tightened their grips on lantern poles. Women exchanged grim nods. Boys fetched bundles of dry brush and pitch. Even the pastor's voice grew iron-hard. The Baron's wickedness ends tonight. The crowd murmured approval. Lila stepped forward. You gotta listen. He ain't like us. He don't bleed right. He don't breathe right. He move walls, breaks minds. He got rituals that pull you somewhere else. And he got women under that ground, alive, dead, both. I don't know. The sheriff wetted his lips. If he's half of what you say. He worse, Lila interrupted. A chill swept the crowd. Dr. Hemswell stepped beside her. We must act quickly. If he intended to complete whatever ritual he attempted tonight, then every hour of delay gives him advantage. Reverend Keaton nodded. Then we go now, before the devil gathers more strength. Torches were lit, lanterns hoisted. The men armed themselves with axes, shovels, and hunting rifles. Women carried blankets and herbs, preparing for the wounded they expected. Some prayed quietly, others clenched their jaws and followed. Lila stood at the front, Hemswell on her right, Reverend Keaton on her left, the sheriff just behind her shoulder. The night air felt heavy, as if holding its breath. The mob, if it could be called that, moved as one toward the iron gates of the Baron's estate. The gates stood open, completely, silently. Waiting. The crowd hesitated. That door ain't ever left open, muttered one man. Not unless he wanted us in, whispered another. Lila stepped through first. Her bare feet sank into the wet dirt of the long drive. The magnolia trees towered overhead, their blossoms hanging limp in the storm's aftermath. The air smelled of bruised petals and something coppery, something like blood. The crowd followed slowly, weapons ready. Hemswell whispered, "Stay close. He may try to isolate us." Lila nodded, though her hands shook. She felt the house before she saw it, felt the pressure, like a distant voice pressing against her mind. Then the shape emerged through the thinning fog. The manor loomed like a sleeping beast, columns cracked, windows dark, roof sagging. It looked older, decayed, as if a century had passed in a single night. "What happened to it?" someone whispered. Lila trembled. This, how it really look, without the glamour he put over it. Reverend Keaton crossed himself. "We tread on cursed ground." The sheriff barked. "Fan out, look for movement, look for survivors, and stay in pairs." The crowd obeyed, but Lila did not move with them. She stood frozen. Morella's voice echoed in her memory. "Run, survive for me," Lila whispered. "I'm coming, hold on." She took one step toward the porch. The house groaned. The front door swung open on its own. Every torch flickered, every lantern dimmed. The air grew colder. Then a figure stood in the doorway. Not the Baron, a woman, young, barefoot, pale, her eyes glowing faint blue. Sarah Winton. Alive, walking, her head tilted in a slow, unnatural arc. "Lila," she whispered, voice like wind through dead leaves. "Lila, he waits." The sheriff raised his gun. "Stop right there." Sarah did not stop. Reverend Keaton stepped forward, voice trembling. "Child, if you mean us no harm, speak." Her jaw cracked open too wide. A low hum began vibrating the porch boards. Lila screamed, "Don't shoot!" But someone already fired. The shot struck Sarah in the chest. She barely reacted, only staggered slightly, like a puppet tugged off balance. Then she fell to her knees. The hum softened. Her mouth closed. Her eyes dimmed. Lila's tears fell hot. "She ain't even alive no more. Why'd you shoot?" The sheriff stammered. She was coming at us, girl. She wasn't human." "No," Lila whispered brokenly. "She were a victim." Before anyone could speak, the house answered. A deep rumble vibrated through the ground. Windows shattered outward. Lanterns exploded. Flames sputtered. The air itself seemed to twist. And from the darkness inside the house came the Baron's voice. Calm, cold, resonant. Round 9 begins now. The house doors slammed shut. The torches blew out. A gust of wind burst from the manor, knocking half the crowd to the ground. Lila screamed as the earth split beneath her feet, and the Baron stepped out through the front wall as if it were smoke. His pale skin glowed faintly. His eyes burned with cold blue fire. His feet did not touch the porch. He hovered inches above the ground. The people screamed. Some ran. Some dropped their weapons. Some fell to their knees praying. Reverend Keaton lifted his cross with trembling hands. "In the name of God." The Baron smiled. "There is no God in my house." He flicked his fingers. The cross turned to ash. The crowd shrieked. Hemswell shouted, "Get Lila out, now!" But the Baron's gaze locked on her immediately. "Come home," he whispered. Lila staggered back, but the ground beneath her feet pulsed, glowing with chalk-white light. A spiral. Just like the one underground. The Baron's voice deepened. "You cannot break the circle. You are the circle." The sheriff aimed at him. The Baron didn't even blink. The gun fired, but the bullet dissolved into blue sparks before it reached him. Gasps ripped through the crowd. The Baron leaned forward, cane materializing into his hand like smoke forming shape. "Lila Mae Corbin," he said softly. "You have run long enough." Lila sobbed. "Why me? Why? What'd I ever do to you?" "You were born," he answered. Morella's last words echoed in Lila's mind. "You always got a choice." Lila swallowed hard. Then she stepped forward. Not in surrender, but in defiance. "I ain't finishing your circle," she whispered. The Baron tilted his head. "You cannot refuse destiny." "I can," Lila said, "and I will." The ground shook violently. The spiral beneath her feet began to burn white-hot. Hemswell lunged toward her. Reverend Keaton shouted a prayer into the storm. The sheriff grabbed his rifle with both hands. The Baron raised his cane. Lightning struck the estate. And all hell tore loose around them.